to 102 Meters, the podcast. I'm Shuki.
And I'm Martin.
So a couple of weeks ago, we went to see the Monet show, the very popular one at the Courtauld that has been running for the past couple of months, but we only managed to catch the last day of it.
It was on the views of the Thames. I believe it had some 19 paintings, could that be? Of the Houses of Parliament, Waterloo Bridge and Charing Cross Bridge, the three notable views of the Thames that Monet executed between 1903 and, 1906 or thereabouts? I mean, he obviously started working on this series before 1903, but yeah, you get what I mean. I'm not talking about the 1870s ones when Monet first came to London due to the Franco-Prussian War. Anyway, please go on, Shuchi.
Yes, so this exhibition has been super popular, but I guess also because it is the views of the Thames, and the Courtauld Institute is located at the Somerset House, which is right on the Thames, and you can see the view of the Thames once you get out of the gallery. It's really the right location to have this show. And it is also the first time that all of these paintings, as supposedly the curatorial project, is that to have the paintings that Monet wanted to have in his show for the first show in Paris when the series was first shown, back together again, and that project being realized and having all of these paintings of the Thames, of Charing Cross and Waterloo Bridge and the Parliament in the same show. And I think one of the most impressionable impressions that's left on me is that it's the moment you enter the room, it's really makes an impression on you, like this whole immersive feeling of having all of these Monet paintings of the Thames surrounding you in the room.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's also quite interesting the subject matter are often the same. I mean, for instance, for paintings of Charing Cross Bridge and Waterloo Bridge, he would paint from his balcony in the Savoy, I think in the first year or on his first visit on the 6th floor and thereafter on the 5th floor. But so you have the same perspective all of the time, and yet it's remarkable how different these works are in terms of the play of light, and how, he would try to capture the different impressions of times of day with the smoke. And so I think, the comparison of these works really highlights the differences among the paintings from the series, which is a comparison you will rarely, there are few occasions where you'll have that opportunity.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's through these sort of variations and differences that you can really see what people like about Monet and what people enjoy about Monet, is that he's so sensitive about the different colors and different combination of colors and how light plays on it. And, this whole Thames series is all about Monet's interest in the London fog, really.
And smoke effects.
Smoke effects, yeah. So the London fog, as everyone would know, that it's a city of fog, as it is known, because of the 19th century Industrial Revolution, with all of the chimneys going up on the South Bank, and you have just very bad air pollution, basically. And that's what's made the London fog, that it has apparently really weird greeny yellowish colors back then. It's not really a pure, like a nice winter fog, like creamy type of fog, not like that. But then Monet's and other artists as well in the 19th century has been really captivated by this sort of aesthetics in their eyes, and Monet has came back to London to specifically paint this effect in his works in the early 2000s, early 20th century. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, what is there to add? I mean, I think it's not just the light effects. I mean, I think the images he has done, it's really like postcard images. And, I've never been a huge fan of Monet at large, and particularly not of the Thames series. Perhaps because there's something too cliched about, like a view of the Houses of Parliament. And it is just very iconic images. I mean, I wasn't there back then, and nor did I do sufficient research, but it would somewhat remind me of, if I were to go to London now as a tourist and I'd send off a postcard to friends or what have you, chances are that I would take a view of Big Ben, which is not at all too dissimilar to one of Monet's paintings. And to me that just seems, I don't know, it just seems like quite pleasing, if you will.
I think you have a very interesting point about it being a postcard, because it is exactly, I think, one of the selling points of Monet's show at the time. Like, I remember the curator said that one of the first painting that got sold was one of those Westminster Houses of Parliament with the big sunset in the back.
Right.
I mean, that's so obviously popular.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who bought the works were Americans, and it was kind of like a postcard for them. I was like, what do you want of a view of London? You want...
Back then, London was also the largest city in the world, and in a way the capital of the world, certainly the Western world.
Exactly. And you'd want something from London, and what better of a souvenir than a amazing painting by Monet of the Thames,
Yeah.
It's really rather good for marketing as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I've never felt too fond. I mean, I think that this sort of, what do we like about these paintings and whatnot? I think that the light effects are really quite mesmerizing, and the sheer difference you see among these works. But that had me and Shuchi also think of James Abbott McNeill Whistler, who also, I believe, some 20, 30 years earlier in the 1870s and late 1860s perhaps, also painted views of the Thames, which are, I'd say, less well known in popular culture, but probably art historically of an equal, if not greater significance. Shuchi, please go on.
Yes, so Whistler, he is an artist who was born in America.
The greatest American artist, you might say. Go on.
The greatest American artist, okay. But he lived most of his lives, adult lives, in the UK, and also between London and Paris also. And you've read about a book on Whistler?
Yeah.
And what did you think of Whistler overall after reading his biography?
Well, I would say he was quite an eccentric who derived a lot of pleasure in provoking the establishment. He was good at starting fights with the leading authorities of the day. For instance, John Ruskin, there was a court case between them. Also Oscar Wilde, even though I think of all of the people in 19th century Britain, Oscar Wilde is probably the person most like him in terms of, the sheer embrace of individuality and eccentricity. And
yes.
So Whistler, he also lived in Paris, and I think he was initially inspired by French realist painters such as Courbet,
yes,
who were also quite novel in their approach. I mean, Courbet, I don't know his entire oeuvre as much as I would like to, but for instance, in many of his paintings of waves in Normandy, he would very thickly use a palette knife, and he wouldn't really mix the colors as smoothly. I mean, in a way, it's realistic, but it's not to the point of idealizing beauty, and there's a great sensitivity to color, and in a way honoring the media one works with, I would be inclined to say. And I think Whistler was influenced by Courbet and many of the French realist painters, and then embraced an art form that was highly individualistic in that, he often depicted mundane subject matter. So when he first came to London, he did many paintings of the Docklands, which was where poor people lived at the time.
yes,
And
And one of his nicest etching series, the Thames series, which
Yeah.
is really amazing.
and in a way, I think, he put an emphasis on color and composition. I mean, traditionally you ascribe to him the view, art for art's sake. I mean, I'm
Yes.
not sure to what extent, maybe you would be
Yeah,
inclined
I
to
mean-
debate that. But at least that's the view he preached during his lifetime. Whether or not he lived by it is another question, of course.
Yes, what I really love about Whistler also is his language and his writings, and he has arguments not just with Ruskin but with Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde has some, he is very good at dissing people just
He's very eloquent,
witty.
yeah.
Yes, and Whistler, he has this famous lecture called the 10 o'clock lecture, which is really a compilation of what he thinks about art and what he thinks art's function should be,
The
and
role of the critic
the role of the critic, which
and
is
ordinary people's tastes. Yeah.
exactly ordinary people's taste and everything, and yeah, Whistler has always been painting a lot of this sort of ordinary scenes and mundane lives, and I think what he finds particularly important is that artists, also with the influence of Baudelaire and his writings on the role of modernity and modern painters, is that you find beauty in ordinary life, and you find
Right.
beauty in the things in the vicinity instead of the history and grand classical stories that is all kind of fictitious. And
I mean, I guess in a way the idea is the goodness of a painting should not depend on the subject matter or historical significance of the subject portrayed.
exactly, as you say, it's like a kind of whole idea of art for art's sake. That's why people ascribe that to him. It's not that he particularly said those words, but you see how the ideas kind of do match. So what's the difference between Whistler's Thames theme scenes and Monet's ones?
Well, I think there are several. I mean, unfortunately, we do not have images, but I think his most famous works are night scenes. And in a way, I think there's a comparison to Monet, because depicting rivers at night, it's a quite challenging thing to do in terms of the light effects. And it suggests a similar sensitivity toward how water interacts with light and the surroundings, just as, Fogg also, in a way, takes you away from a realistic, or certainly a matter-of-factly representation of a river. But I think key differences are, for one, I think Whistler was heavily inspired by Japanese woodcuts, such as by Hokusai, in terms of perspective, whereas Monet always painted from his balcony, and in a way you can see that in terms of the angle. I think with Whistler it's also a bird's eye view, quite typically, similarly to Monet, but I'd say like the relationship of depth, foreground and background, it's not as clearly defined in a way that you would find in Japanese woodcuts.
Yeah, I guess you can also see in some works like the Battersea Bridge one, the old Battersea Bridge, he would have like the bridge right in your face, like in the middle of the painting. That's very Japanese woodcut print. Also like, the Van Gogh late works with all the tree trunks in the middle.
Yeah.
That's also, this is the sort of things that Western paintings didn't have.
Like highlighting the mundane, or
No, but having like compositionally, you'd have something like completely like really blocky and black in the middle.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't have, because with the Western traditionally, it's usually about like perspective, and you'd have the depth of the painting. But with that, it's like you really have something right in front of you, like blocking the whole painting. Yeah, and also Whistler would do these things like there's this paintings called Nocturne in Blue and Silver at the Harvard
the Fogg
University.
Museum.
And he will have these, like these decorative leaves and bamboo leaves
Yeah.
right at the edge of the painting. That's also something Van Gogh did as well. I think
Yeah.
also influences of
Yeah.
Japanese
Yeah.
woodcut. So these sort of decorative things put in the foreground and creating a perspective without too much touch to the painting.
Yeah.
And behind the leaves is just all water.
Yeah.
But then you can still feel a sense of depth with this sort of very
Yeah.
simple decorations.
Yeah. In a way, I prefer Whistler, just because, I mean, I know his ethos was, kind of art for art's sake, but I think there's something quite personal about his works. I feel his works are quite touching because in a way they capture a fleeting moment, but it's not so much really about the scene portrayed. I think it is somewhat infused with feelings and a certain sensitivity, this kind of feeling you might have if you go for a walk at night alone and it's raining and you hear the raindrops, and there's something quite contemplative and reflective about it. And I don't want to say that was Whistler's intention, but I think with Monet, I think his work is far less personal. I think it's merely taking a delight in the study of light, really. But, I mean, my question to Monet is, why the heck should I care? I mean, like, sure, you can paint, and sure, it's interesting, how you arrange the colors, but, what does it have to do with me? I mean, it doesn't, put me into a heightened mental state, as it were. And I'd say I could probably say that about the entirety of Monet's Earth. I just don't think it stirs me particularly deeply, and so.
I think there's partly I do agree with you that I personally is really a big fan of Whistler as well, also just because how weird and quirky he is as a person. But and there's something about his painting that is quite special, is that he very different from like Monet and the people of his contemporary, that he doesn't paint with very thick proper like oil paint, but he really dilutes his paint, and he calls it his sauce, his special sauce.
Okay.
there's got a recipe to it, and he apparently I mean, it might be a myth that he's created for himself, but apparently he has these really long brushes, and then he would have this sauce on his brush, and he would stand like very far away from the canvas and then paint his nocturne scenes, these night scenes.
I mean, they were famously done quite quickly, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you can see that from the painting, that it's very big brush strokes, almost quite Abbott-like, and the tonality of it is also a little bit abstract. It's very similar tonalities and everything. And yeah, I think that's actually, and compared to Whistler's, this type of very abstract kind of painting, that Monet's painting is actually very, very worked on.
Yeah.
And I think that's a rather interesting point, in that you've mentioned before about this court case between Ruskin and Whistler. Actually, why? So to tell the story in short sentences, so Ruskin's written a critical review of Whistler's exhibition, saying how he is like a ill-educated painter.
I think he described a work of his. It's the Falling Rocket, which is in Detroit now. It's a painting, night scene of a firework, as it were. He described it as Whistler throwing paint into the public's face. I believe, or maybe I'm not sure if I got the quote right, but the gist is that it's a public affront, and that that his work does not deserve of the title of art, because it's really, he's really playing with people.
And he also called Whistler that I have seen and heard much of Cockney impudence before now, but never expected to hear a coxcomb ask 200 guineas for flinging a pot of paint in the public's face. So in this comment, what he's really saying is not just that the painting is bad per se and effortless, but also that it costs 200 guineas. That is the point.
Yeah.
That he doesn't think the effort that Whistler's put into these paintings of apparently he's done it in 2 days, that it is really worth that much money. And it was actually Ruskin's one of his argument is you have to see it in the background of all of this industrialization and the creating of a market and capitalism, in that he Ruskin, as you know, he is very much of a socialist guy, and with William Morris and everything. And he is arguing for the good old labor, and an artist should be paid for the amount of labor they've put into it. You should have the Pre-Raphaelites have done a lot of detailed works and days of work on the painting to be paid properly.
Right.
And Whistler's spent 2 days on this painting, and then you get paid you're asking for 200 guineas. That's ridiculous. Guineas. Yeah. Yes, and that's ridiculous. And comparatively, when you look at Monet, and with all of the stories that that's been told about, Monet spending, not only painting a lot in London when he was living at Savoy, but then he would then bring back the canvas to his studio, and he would work on it, rework on it, and rework on it again for months and years. And you can also see that in the painting, that it is very worked on.
Yeah.
It's extremely layered, and you can see all the different colors and tonalities and brushworks that goes into it. I guess that's also interesting comparison between the two. That one is perhaps Monet is perhaps also more acceptable to people because he's put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, I guess
and
so.
I think people do really appreciate that, especially if you are the general public, that putting effort into things, it's a sign of virtue.
But then you could also say that it's not a lot of effort because he's painting the same view all over again, many times. And, it wasn't that many of these paintings were done from life. I mean, presumably some of them, I'm not sure, but many of them were finished in studios, or probably all of them were, but maybe he also started some from scratch completely in the studio. I'm not sure, but you might say that by limiting his production and choosing his subject matter more selectively, that in a way it's a greater amount of artistic effort. I mean, surely the job of a painter doesn't merely consist in painting, it consists in choosing the right subject matter and being inspired in the right moments. And if you repeat yourself, that seems like, perhaps an economic necessity, but oftentimes also, a compromise, really.
Yeah, but I think the point of Monet is probably also having the same subject matter, and then you would have different lightings and
perhaps,
this whole comparison and variations, the whole point of it.
But still, I mean, that brings me back to my question, why the heck should I care?
Okay, that brings me back to my point, that I think what Monet reminds me of, especially when you go to, let's say, what's that museum called? La Orangerie? Orangerie in Paris, with the big 2 oval rooms of the water lilies. And including this show at the Courtauld, when you walk in, that moment of amazement, immersive effect, what it really reminds me of is Team Lab.
Team Lab. Well,
you
what
know
are they?
What Team Lab is? Represented by Pace, the light room, with they did all of these immersive exhibitions with the light that fills the whole room, like screens everywhere.
Sure.
And then you'd have flowers flying and things like that.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, isn't that also a bit like those experiencing Van Gogh exhibitions where you can walk into a flower or what have you?
Yeah, but better quality.
Okay.
Like more immersive.
Ah, right. Okay, understood.
Yeah. It feels like that. It's like the ultimate entertainment.
I guess so, yeah.
I think the difference that, I mean, actually, to be honest.
So in a way, we're getting to the point that Monet is more like lowbrow culture, and Whistler is...
Well, I'm not saying that, but entertainment is also important and interesting.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, I was also thinking, I mean, obviously, you know, you don't see any paintings by Whistler on the market, but even if you would, I don't think, you know, no, they would fetch the prices of Monet, because it's
actually, I
not
know.
such a...
How many Whistler paintings have you seen?
I can't remember one at auction.
But like in general, just in like
I don't
face to
know.
face, in person.
Maybe 20.
Yeah, I feel there is also a sense it's a bit. It doesn't amaze you that much when you see it in person sometimes.
I don't know. I think they're quite cool.
I mean, they are cool. Yeah, I get it, but I think also maybe it's also because how they're framed, and like I went to the museum in Glasgow and saw.
I mean, that's also
paintings.
Underfunded. It seems
Yeah,
it's a bit
so
dilapidated.
It is. It's framed so badly, and all of the lighting was so bad. Like they didn't have an anti-reflective glass.
Yeah.
So everything, like his paintings are dark enough that you can't see them even without the glass. And then it was badly lit, like really bright light, and then with the non-anti-reflective glass, so like you can't see anything.
Yeah. But I mean, I
bad.
was also thinking, I mean, Whistler was hugely influential in the UK. I mean, you know, Thickert, Lavery, and I'm sure many other generations of artists were influenced by him. And I'd certainly be inclined to say that his influence, certainly on British art, was far more significant than Monet.
Sure. For sure. I mean, I think Monet's probably also seen Whistler's works of the Thames, and it must have been part of the influence as well. Especially this whole subject matter of the London fog, which is really Whistler's thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, another connection between Whistler and Monet is that they both at the end of the 19th century, there's this wave of artists who's really starting to care about how their works are presented. From this Courtauld show, it was very interestingly mentioned that Monet was very, very picky about how he wanted to present his series of London views. And he wanted the whole... Monet wanted this whole show to be his own solo show. Like he didn't want like a couple of paintings to be presented in a big group show, which is generally what people used to do, what dealers used to do. They used to do like, I don't know, impressionist show or French paintings and just put a bunch of new works in. But with this show, what Monet wanted was specifically these, I think it was 37 or 30 something of his new London views, and put together into 2-3 rooms, each room representing one specific subject matter. Yeah. And have that presentation of its own. And this was also something that Whistler really cared about. He was very famously kind of by the end of the 19th century, in the 70s, in the 80s, he was doing a lot of solo shows for himself. And some people even said that he's better of an interior decorator than the works that's being presented there. So like there was this show of that he's presented for his etching series of Venice, of one of the late etching series, and he designed the whole exhibition. He will have bright yellow walls with sort of patterns of like white butterflies, which is his sign. And then he will have like some sort of specific lighting, and he had a bright yellow sofa in the middle of the room. And then he even requested some of his female guests to dress up in black or white gowns, as suggested by him, to fit in the color palette and harmonies of the exhibition. Well, and then I think the next day there was review that came out saying that, oh yeah, the exhibition was great. the yellow walls, the sofas,
Yeah.
they're all really amazing. Oh, you asked me about the works? I don't remember them.
Actually, that's an interesting comment. I mean, having read the Balthus biography for our last talk, I remember one of the comments of Francis Bacon and criticisms of Balthus was that, yeah, he was a great interior decorator when he moved into the Villa Medici in Rome, and, he changed the walls, and, everything looked impeccable. But he had nothing to say about his paintings, thereby implying that he doesn't consider him a particularly good painter, perhaps. And I guess the take-home message is that, perhaps being a good painter, which I think Balthus and Whistler were, probably better than Bacon, is that you should care about the surroundings and how your art is displayed. I wonder what would Whistler think if he went to what's it called, the Hunterian Gallery in Glasgow. Would he be mortified if he sees his dark paintings under plexiglass with ill-considered lighting systems and what else? I mean, I remember it didn't do justice to the works, and
not at
I mean,
all.
it's a university gallery, and
but they have one of the best collections of
but
Whistler.
it feels like a university gallery, and university written in capital letters, rather than I mean, it should be in a gallery of national significance, which the Hunterian Gallery of Glasgow University most certainly is not, at least in terms of how the art is displayed.
Yes, that is.
So
yes.
what he'd be mortified, you think?
Yes, I think I was mortified.
Yeah.
I was very much looking forward to seeing the works.
Yeah.
Very sad. But well, they cannot do the exhibitions for themselves forever. So
Yeah.
But yeah, coming back to Whistler and Monet's series of the Thames views, I think another interesting topic we could talk about at the end is that both of the paintings are very much about the London fog. And there has been a lot of scholarly writing, at least on Whistler, that I know of. I think probably on Monet's ones as well, that they would talk a lot not only about the changes of the Thames that has gone through history, but also about the fact that the London fog was really about air pollution and the experience of people in London walking in this sort of pollution and living there and sort of going on the boats and walking across the bridge on the Thames in these conditions. And there has been some sort of criticism also of the fact that what Whistler and Monet they've both painted is not a very realistic view of the London fog. It is not that beautiful, really, if you have some really smelly and yellowy, greeny fog around you. It is not that pretty.
Sure.
But in Whistler and Monet's paintings, they've been turned into this beautiful scenes of London. And I think it was also a criticism of Monet's contemporary at the time, saying that, but this is a beautified version of it, of what London fog is really like.
Yeah.
What do you feel about this contradiction between whether we should represent something that is more socially and politically correct, in that you should represent the suffering and speak of the suffering of the people at the time instead of putting an aesthetic veil?
Well, I think everything has its place, and I think it just has to fit into the oeuvre of an artist. I don't think it's a shortcoming. I mean, I think, if you have ethical concerns, it's okay. But what I don't like is if these ethical concerns take on like a meta-critical level as to the extent that they can judge over other, ways of going about art that are more laissez-faire and liberal in some sense. So that's a problem I have. I have a problem with this meta-critical view on ethics, but otherwise I think, I think for some artists, the social context is intimately intertwined with understanding and appreciating the work in its fullest extent.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.